Thank you, Chair. We're now live on YouTube. When you're ready, would you like to start the meeting?
Thank you, Wendy. Right, welcome to today's meeting. I would like, in the absence of the Vice Chairman, I'd like to nominate Councillor Ollie Davey to the Vice Chair. Could you indicate by your ticks and crosses if you approve, please? You're on mute, Wendy.
Sorry, just letting YouTube viewers know the vote is underway, and we have 7 votes in support, so that is carried.
Thank you, Wendy. Sorry, I didn't vote. Oh. Well, good morning. Welcome to East Devon District Council's Virtual Planning Committee on 24th of November 2021. I'm your chair, Councillor Eileen Wragg. Based on the decision of our extraordinary meeting of council on the 26th of July this year, I would like to remind both members and public attending or watching that this council has delegated much of its decision-making power to our senior officers. This is for a short period of time only, to the 17th of January 2022, and is due to concerns relating to COVID risk. We will continue. Consequently, this meeting is being held remotely and on a consultative basis only. We will continue to adhere as closely as possible to procedural rules detailed in our Constitution. However, where this meeting would have normally decided a matter, it will now make recommendations to a senior officer. The officer will then take that recommendation into account when making their decision. The meeting can be viewed online and will be recorded. Please bear this in mind throughout the meeting. Therefore, may I remind colleagues to be careful with their language and that the code of conduct applies throughout our meeting. We reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Shades of Jackie Weaver, I think. As this meeting is dependent on internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. If we are not able to reconnect after 15 minutes, this meeting will be adjourned and reconvened at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for further details. Could colleagues please ensure your microphone is muted when you are not speaking? This will help avoid any disturbance from background noise. Could you also keep your point short and not interrupt when somebody else is speaking? Should you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public can view the agenda by visiting our website at www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone? When you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Thank you. Wendy.
Thank you. Chair, I'll start with you. Councillor Wragg.
Present.
Thank you. Vice Chair, Councillor Davey.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor De Sarum.
Present, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Present, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Present, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Present, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Pook.
Present, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Present, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. And Councillor Woodward.
Yes, I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. The running order for today's meeting and speakers list can be viewed under agenda item 1 on pages 4 to 5. Agenda item 2, minutes of the consultative meeting held on 27th of October 2021, pages 6 to 9. If anyone has a comment on these minutes, please raise your electronic hand. If there are no raised hands, I will take this as an indication that you are happy that the minutes are noted. I see no raised hands, so those minutes are noted. Agenda item 3, apologies. Wendy.
Yeah, we've had a few apologies for this meeting. So Councillor Bloxham, Councillor Brown, Councillor Chamberlain, Councillor Howe, Councillor Wibley, Councillor Wright, and also ward members Councillor Jackson and Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Wendy. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Wendy, could you do a roll call for the declarations of interest, please?
Yep, certainly. So members, when I call your name, if you could just let me know the item number, what type of interest you are declaring and why you are declaring that interest. So Councillor Ragg, if I could start with you, please.
Yes, none that I can see, but if there is anything, I will declare it, but I can't see anything here, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
None, Wendy, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor De Sarum.
Thank you, Wendy. Likewise, none, as I see no Exmouth applications on this agenda today. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gazzard.
None, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
None, Wendy.
Councillor Lawrence.
None for me either, thank you, Wendy.
Councillor Pook.
Yes, please, Wendy. Item 10, beer and Branscombe. It's a personal interest, and it's a personal interest because I know the architects and I actually work with them on other community and personal schemes, but I've no pecuniary interest.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pratt.
None, thank you, Wendy.
Councillor Skinner.
I can't see any, Wendy. Like Councillor Eileen Ragg, I think what I might do is say if something comes up as we twiddle along, I might let you know then, but at the moment, no, nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Woodward.
None, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Right, agenda item 5, matters of urgency. There are no matters of urgency to discuss. Item 6, confidential exempt items. Again, there are no confidential exempt items to discuss. Agenda item 7, planning appeals statistics, pages 10 to 21. Over to you, Mr. Rose, for an update, please.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. So yeah, there's 5 appeal decisions on the sheet this month, although apologies, Green Acres, which is the first one on there, was reported last month as well. So I've already been over that one. That leaves 4 decisions, 3 of which I'm pleased to say were dismissed. 1 appeal was allowed, and that relates to the dairy barn in Honiton. We were concerned as officers that the agricultural need for the building hadn't been demonstrated, and were concerned about the visual impact on the AONB, but the inspector felt that the applicant had demonstrated a need for the building and wasn't concerned about wider harm to the AONB, so allowed that appeal. Thank you. You're muted, Councillor Ragg.
That's a rare occurrence. Agenda item 9, we move into the application now. Application 21 1966. It's a full application. minor, up along Elm Way, Sidport, pages 33 to 42. I'd like to welcome Mr. Adrian Brewer, objector, and Alan Cook, agent. Over to you, Mr. Rose, to present your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So hopefully you can see my screen. As you say, this relates to up along. So you can see here the location for the site. So here in pink, and you can see the relationship to the surrounding properties here. The applications to demolish an existing bungalow on the site and to construct a new house and garage. So you can see the dotted line of the bungalow, and you can see the outline of the dwelling and the garage. It's here because it's contrary to the view of the ward member, and also the town council have stated they feel it's an uninspiring design. The site's in the built-up area boundary, and it's just outside of the AONB. So we can see the layout of the site. It's replacing a building, a bungalow on a very similar footprint to the existing, or similar part of the site, I should say. And these are the elevations of the dwelling proposed. So 2-storey with this linked garage onto the, facing onto the road side there. And if we just move along, so there we got the further elevation and the roof plan. And then we've got the floor plan. So you can see ground floor, typical lounge dining area, and then linked to the garage, and then the first floor, number of bedrooms. And these are the elevations. So you can see their combination of render and cladding. And this is the bungalow. So this is the view as you come up the road. This is the bungalow at the moment, and you can see the relationship to the property to the front. As I move on, here's the bungalow, typical bungalow, but not in that good a condition, poor state of repair, as you can see from this photo here. So this is the view looking towards a neighbour. And then this is the view from the property on the other side of the road. I apologise, there's some errors in the report referring to Lockswood House as Brook House. That's errors on our part, and I apologise for that. But these are the images from the neighbour across the road looking back down towards the bungalow, which will be replaced by a house. And then again from their property looking down, and you can see where the bungalow is and where the house will be placed. And this is from the property to the south. So you can see the relationship there already with the windows to the bungalow looking onto the side of this property, and there will be a house proposed in its place. And there's another photo of that. So as I mentioned, it's a similar footprint to the existing bungalow on the site, which is dotted, but with extensions upwards and to various other parts of the site to make it the footprint a little larger. In terms of the principle, that's acceptable. We're in the built-up area boundary, so the replacement of a dwelling with a dwelling is acceptable in principle. In terms of the design, there's no real innovation here, as the town councillor pointed out, but it's replacing a bungalow of a poor design. And as you hopefully seen from the images there, there's varying design of properties in the street there. So there's no one character of property. So from that point of view, given no strong character, the proposal is considered to be largely sympathetic. It will be higher and more prominent in the street scene, but you can see that there are trees and hedges there that partly screen it. Sorry. So in terms of design, it's considered to be acceptable in its context. The report then goes on to talk about issues of amenity impact. So I showed the photos to Lockswood House, which is off to the left here. So if you imagine you go at the top of this road, look left, and you get that property. And there's a concern from that property from here about the inclusion of a first floor window at this level here that would look back across this front garden area and be visible from this conservatory. And this is a usable garden area, as you can see. But there's approximately 50 meters from between these windows. It's across a road. You can obviously view some of this garden area from the road there, although there are hedge and tree planting that prevent that. So there will be a greater level of overlooking from this first floor window. But given that 50 metres, it's considered that it'd be hard to object to that window being in situ, given that distance and given that it's across the road. And then in relation to this property to the south, again, there's windows here at ground floor that already have a relationship with this property, so there'll be no greater overlooking from the ground floor. In the first floor, there's been one window removed. There are 2 additional bedroom windows, but they'll be relating no greater level of harm or overlooking than occurs at present. Let's go back to the plan. Yeah, so those windows are here, looking at the side of that property. So whilst I understand the concerns of the neighbour on the other side of the road about the impact of a 2-storey building and that window, the design is considered to be acceptable, and given the distances between the properties across the road on these large plots, it's not considered that we'd be able to justify refusal on the basis of its impact. So principles acceptable, the design's acceptable, and the impact on the neighbours isn't harmful enough to be able to justify refusal. So we're recommending approval with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'd like to invite Adrian Brewer, objector, to speak. Welcome to the meeting, Mr. Brewer. You have 3 minutes and you'll be notified 30 seconds before the time is up. Would you like to start?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. Right. Thank you. I assume that all the councillors have read in total my objections to the proposal, as I've been led to believe. Our main concern is this window. We support the demolition, although the proposed design is rather disappointing. But there are no houses in this road where the privacy has been obliterated, as this window will do to our property. The picture from our conservatory is the middle of the house, and had other pictures been taken, the privacy would have been taken away from the kitchen and the sitting room and 2 bedrooms downstairs, not even, and not to mention the front garden, as has been mentioned already. We would have taken away our objection had that window been removed to the northeast elevation. That's round the corner. Our privacy would not have been impinged. But I did ask for this window to be moved by the applicant, and unfortunately that was refused out of hand. Although I would have, as I've said, removed my objection to the proposal. As I've said, there's no other houses in this road. If the application is passed, it will set a precedent for the future development, and with the similar problems attached. And finally, if this should get passed, the privacy of my home will be completely lost in perpetuity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. Now we have the agent, Mr. Alan Cook. You have 3 minutes. Welcome to the meeting.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, good morning, councillors. The existing building is approximately 100 years old, of poor construction and in very bad repair and unsuitable for renovation. The proposed dwelling approximately uses the same footprint as the original building, except it is set slightly further back from the road and lower to minimise impact on the neighbours. And the garage is set in front of the building to avoid a steep access. All the rooms and windows have been carefully considered to take advantage of sun, views, and to avoid overlooking neighbours. They also have to work for their purpose, i.e. in a bedroom, consideration of the space to accommodate a bed, dressing, etc., with ideal position of doors and windows. This is It is suggested that the room might not be used as a bedroom, but this is an application for residential use, and this is therefore not a planning issue. It is suggested that the window could be moved to the side. This would lose daylight as the elevation faces high trees, and it would seriously compromise the layout of the room as a bedroom. The house has been designed as an eco-friendly building with solar panels, heat pump, high insulation levels, heat recovery air circulation system, and air tightness, and it will have a very low CO2 impact. I would like to address the objection from the owner of Loxwood House. Upalong was 50 years old when Loxwood was built. It is suggested that one bedroom window facing the road would cause loss of privacy. Loxwood House is already overlooked to an extent that compromises the overlooking privacy argument. The buildings are 44 metres apart across a road, and the house and garden of Loxwood are clearly visible from anyone using the Elmway. And the view of Loxwood from Upalong is screened by a shrubbery, 5 metre high evergreen shrub and solid wooden gates. Most roads in the UK have houses on either side with windows facing each other, often much closer than 44 metres. In conclusion, all houses on opposite sides of a road overlook one another to some extent. In this case, Loxwood House overlooks Upalong to a much greater extent than the other way around. Distance, elevation, size and position of the only window facing the road in Upalong mean that any loss of privacy to Loxwood
30 seconds, Speaker.
And not a reason for a refusal of planning permission. The Town Council did not like the design, but they have provided no evidence to support their view. The design is well proportioned, using traditional materials to blend with neighbours and to avoid unnecessary impact. I trust that members of the committee will accept the objections and to the application and not substantiated.
3 minutes, Speaker.
And will approve the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Right, now we've got some hands up. Councillor Desarum first.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I believe you don't have the ward member present. So, as speaking as a member of the committee, I'd like to comment as follows. It is quite clear that we have got a 100-year-old building in a bad state of repair, which is going to be replaced by an eco-friendly building with a very low CO2 impact, and that's something that I think is very positive. We have also read in our packs that this development gets support from policy H6, if I've read correctly, and basically the officers are satisfied with the design. I fully understand the Adrian Brewer's concerns that he raised about the window, and it is disappointing that it cannot be raised to the northeast elevation, but clearly we have been told there's the 50-metre separation. I would like to suggest that maybe if there's an issue of visibility, I think in some cases we've asked for the glass, special non-visible glass to be put in so that they can still see, but obviously it is harder for people to see what people are doing. So that's the only proposal I'd make, if we haven't already decided that, to have special glass visibility. Other than that, I'm happy to propose approval in line with the officer's recommendation, subject to finding a seconder. Thank you, Madam Chair. Or thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that, please?
I'll second that, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Lawrence is next. I'll let him crack on this one.
Right. First of all, I would like to, just to be absolutely fair, I'd like to ask Mr. Cook about the issue of having frosted obscure glass window. Would that be considered?
It would be very unusual, I think, in a bedroom. And the reason for the window this side is because the layout of the room, it would compromise it completely if it went to the side. It wasn't that we were trying to be awkward. It's just that the room is, it's been. When I design to consider how the rooms are going to be used and the positions of windows, doors, etc. and it wouldn't work if you moved.
Okay, that answers that one, and of course the objector could always plant a tree. Councillor Richard Lawrence, you're seconded. Yeah,
I'm seconded, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to say that one of the complaints is that the design is a bit uninspiring. Well, I think the existing bungalow is a bit uninspiring, to be truthful. But one of the benefits of it is the house is set fairly low down from the person who has objected. I do find this thing about the window a bit of a sticking point, really, because we've been told that it compromises the layout of the room. Well, the other bedroom 3, that has a window that size, so I don't think it compromises anything at all. And I think it's probably a little bit of bloody mindedness, to be honest. I can't see any reason why that window can't be moved. But overall, I think it's a good plan, and I support the officer's approval.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner.
I'm fully in support, actually, of the application. The thing is, and why I wanted Councillor Lawrence to do the seconding was because actually what Councillor Desarma put in about frosting the window to me was a no-no, and I think we've got over that one, and I think that's what it is. So I'm hoping that Councillor Desarma will re-amend his approval to remove that part, and he may or he may not. But I'm of the opinion it's difficult to want to come out here because I want to support it, but I want to keep it. I'm quite happy with keeping it exactly as it is, partly against what Councillor Lawrence has said about moving it to the side. I don't see there's a necessity to move it side. I think there's lots of gap between the two. And as Mr. Cook suggested earlier, there are many housing schemes that are much closer, and I don't see it's an impediment on them at all. In fact, you could turn it the other way round and say, well, it's the house looking down on them as well. So it works two ways, and I think that's a fair approach. So from my perspective, I'm quite happy with it to go as it is. So I just want to see where members end up, Chair, if you don't mind, because I would actually make a recommendation to go with the recommendation as it already sits, but I just need to know where other members sit first.
Well, Councillor Skinner, Councillor Desarma didn't ask for that to be a condition.
Right, okay.
That is why I asked the applicant the question, and we had a very rational answer. So the application is as it is.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Key. Councillor Key.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yes. I mean, I concur with what Councillor Skinner has said. In actual fact, now if that window wasn't there, what a bland wall that would actually be to look at from the adjoining property. I mean, you've got a site there that is double the size of, or the same size as the two adjoining properties there. So it is a big site. It's a distance from anywhere, right? And not only that, I mean, this is a bedroom. I mean, you don't stand there like you would at a sitting room window looking out at the view. I mean, you're there, it's used as a bedroom. So I cannot see, sort of too much of a problem with the overlooking, and I fully support as it stands on our application. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Key. And there is quite a distance between the two properties. Councillor Pook, anything to add?
Yeah, just this issue of overlooking comes up time and time again, and we have to eventually go back to the officers to look at policy and look at the technical details. I think if the officers are coming down with the idea that it's a suitable distance or not won't impinge on the quality, then we must accept the officers. Just to clarify something from what Councillor Lawrence said, we are looking at from my understanding, we are looking at the window in bedroom 3. Whether or not it be moved is irrelevant. I understand the architect's explanation, but on a more fundamental thing, I think the other opposition is on the design. And again, and I'll be discussing this later, design is very subjective. if it complies and it is reasonable, I think we should be accepting it. So I'm happy to support.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, there's comments about it being uninspiring and the finish, but there are conditions which the officers to have regard to the finish of the property. And just to repeat what you said, Chair, that there's quite a lot of space in between, and if it were me, I'd plant a few trees, and then we could save the planet at the same time.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward. Right, no more hands up, so over to Mrs. Shaw, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members, you have before you the recommendation to approve subject to the conditions as set out in the report. Please would you indicate whether you support the motion to recommend approval, against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Support recommendation to approve.
Thank you. Councillor De Saran.
Support recommendation to approve.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Support approval.
Councillor Key.
Support approval.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pook.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt.
Support approval.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Councillor Woodward.
Support approval.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. So that was unanimous in support. So that application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Wendy. Right, now we move to item 11, application 211690 full. It's minor application for Steepy Fields, Cooks Lane, Axminster, and you find it on pages 53 to 60. I'd like to welcome to the meeting Matthew Dalton Aram and Councillor Moulding. He's becoming quite a regular, Mr. Dalton Aram. Right, over to you, Chris. Present your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so Steepy Fields, Cook Lane, Axminster. So it's a retrospective application for construction for a detached building. So there's two buildings on the site. Application for one of the buildings, retrospective, that they want to use as an annex, but then they want to swap the uses. So the main house will become the annex and the new building becomes the main house. And it's here because it's contrary to the view of the ward member. So you can see the sites, well, hopefully you can demonstrate from this, it's detached from the town, it's enclosed, it's not highly visible. And this is the building that's been constructed. So we've got the original building and then the cabin, and what they want to do, as I say, is get consent for the cabin and then use the cabin as the main house and the original dwelling as an annex to the main house. So quite unusual way of doing it. And there's the layout to the new building with 2 bedrooms. So there we go. Here we've got the site as it's laid out at the moment. So we've got the original dwelling, and then we've got the annex, and as I say, they want to swap them over so that the new building becomes the main house and the original building becomes an annex to the main house. And you can see hopefully from these photos that the site's well screened, not near any other properties. And I'll just move around the site, you get an idea of the appearance of the cabin that will become the main house, and the views out and how secluded the site is. So as I say, it's a secluded plot surrounded by trees. The cabin was originally constructed as an artist studio, but the applicant wants more living space, so they've redesigned it as a dwelling, and they've advised that the applicant will move into the cabin to become the main house, and then the original house will become an annex for the applicant's son to live in and granddaughter to stay in when they come and visit. With regard to the principle of development, it's outside the built-up area boundary. So usually a new dwelling in this location in isolation wouldn't be considered acceptable. There's a 1 bed, the original dwelling is 1 bed, and the new building to be constructed is 2 beds, hence the case for needing more space. The But in terms of being outside the built-up area boundary, there's no objection in those circumstances to annexes being created for dwellings. It's not unusual for people to build annexes in their plots, detached for parents or relatives or people that need to move in that they're caring for. And appeal decisions have determined that those annexes can be laid out to be capable of independent occupation. So it can have a kitchen, lounge, bathroom, bedroom, all those things that you would need to be independent. But case law and appeals state that it's the functionality and how that's physically used and related to the main dwelling that's key. In this case, it's the same land, so the two buildings are physically related, so there will be that link between the two. And functionally, the applicant has advised that the son will come, or the son will live there, and there will be this interrelationship between the two, so it will be used as an annex. As I mentioned, no wider visual impact. In terms of other matters, the original dwelling, at the time of the site visit from officers, was let as a holiday let, which undermines their argument about having this functional link and this need for the son to live in it. But we've advised that that was a temporary situation while the son was away. But given this unusual relationship of switching the main dwelling and annex, and given the time we visited the site, the applicant, the son wasn't living in the unit, and when it was let as a holiday let, we're recommending approval, but only subject to a legal agreement, which would mean that the annex has to be an annex, and it can't be used independently or for holiday let, and that will be secured by a legal agreement rather than a condition in this instance, because that gives us much more control given the history of this site. So no wider harm, very unusual situation in terms of switching the main house to become the annex to a different property, but there's no harm from it, subject to that legal agreement to ensure that this building stays as an annex to the main house. So subject to that, recommended for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Right, Matthew Dalton Arman, you have 3 minutes. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. We are thankful for the officer's recommendation of approval. Would concur with the summary of the merits of the proposal contained within the committee report. As Mr. Rose has set out, we do acknowledge that the proposal before you is slightly unusual in that the building, the cabin, has been constructed at the site without the benefit of prior planning permission. The situation is also unusual as the application proposes to use the constructed cabin as a dwelling, with the existing dwelling steeply fields retained as an annex via a swap in uses, which is proposed to be controlled by a legal agreement. However, we consider this is the most suitable way to regularise the existing planning situation at the site in a way which the council would be able to appropriately control the use in perpetuity. Officers appear to agree within the committee report that the proposed approach is sound and acceptable from a planning perspective. Well, Mr. Rose has already set this out, but by way of background, the cabin was originally intended to be used as an artist studio, incidental to the enjoyment of the main house. But the applicant's family circumstances changed, necessitating more living space, so the building was redesigned during construction. As explained within the supporting planning statement, there is a need for the annex to provide overflow accommodation at the site and to provide accommodation for the applicant's son, who was discharged from the military on medical grounds rather. He needs his own space, but which is close to and reliant on his mother. The applicant also often has her granddaughter to stay with her. There are only 2 bedrooms within the cabin and a single bedroom within the original dwelling, Steepyfields. Therefore, without the annex, there would not be enough accommodation at the site to cater for the applicant and her partner, her granddaughter and her son. As acknowledged by the committee report, both buildings are modest in size, although the 2-bedroom cabin is slightly larger than the existing 1-bedroom dwelling. However, they both occupy the same land, planning unit, sharing a garden, amenity and parking areas and access, meaning they are well related to each other and would have a functional and dependent relationship. Further, the site is secluded and well screened in the landscape and from nearby neighbours, ensuring that no adverse impacts would arise from the proposed use of the buildings. It's considered that if planning permission had been applied for prior, to the construction of the cabin, it's likely that the council would have approved it for use as an annex, and likely also to have been approved the swap in uses, noting the small size of the existing house. Therefore, the fact that the application is made in retrospect rather than prior to construction, it is largely immaterial, particularly noting that the planning system allows a submission of retrospective planning applications to regularise situations such as this. In addition, with a few minor tweaks, the constructed building would have benefited from available permitted development rights as a building used for purposes incidental to the enjoyment of the main house, such as an art studio, home office, gym, etc. In summary, therefore, it's considered there are no reasonable planning grounds on which planning permission could be withheld, and the proposed use of the respective buildings as proposed can be reasonably secured and controlled in perpetuity by the council via a legal agreement. Consequently, we would request that members recommend approval of the submitted application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Now I have Councillor Moulding down to speak, but I think that might be not the case now. I don't see him in the meeting. Wendy, can you confirm?
Yes, he's just arrived. He's just in.
Okay. Is he there yet? Like Donkey and Shrek, isn't it?
Councillor Moulding? He's showing us his camera is on.
Yes, he is.
Unmuted.
Yeah.
Maybe he can't hear us.
I'm trying to get in, but I can't get my camera. Can you hear me, Wendy?
Yeah, we can hear you, Andrew.
Yeah, but I can't get my camera for some reason.
Your camera is on and it's pointed to your printer, it looks like.
Oh, there we are then. I've got that wrong then. I don't know how I alter that. Never mind. Doesn't matter that you don't need to see me, I don't believe. You can see my printer instead.
We know what you look like, Andrew.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, would you like to speak? You've got 5 minutes.
Well, I don't need 5 minutes, Chair, because I'm more than happy with this recommendation. The officers seem to be perfectly happy with the situation on this property, and therefore I recommend that this application is approved.
Well, that was short and sweet, Andrew.
It was very much so.
Thank you. Now, I will just say that I know that some members do get a little irritated at retrospective applications coming in, but it is not against planning law. Now then, Councillor Philip Skinner.
And thank you for that, Chair, because absolutely.
I knew you were going to say that.
It is planning law and there is nothing wrong with retrospective planning, but no doubt it's going to be mentioned later. But let's get the backdrop of this. When we look at the picture that's in front of us now, it fits in, it doesn't affect anybody else. You've got the circumstances behind it. Was it right to carry on and do it without planning? No, it wasn't really right to do that. It should have been done the proper way. But I think as Mr. Dalton RM pointed out, does it fit within our policy? Well, the officers have clearly made that point that it does fit within our policy. And in fact, probably it's a little bit more belt and braces than it may have been if it had come properly by making sure that we fine it down to a legal agreement and the likes of it. So I'm not going to battle on too much more. I'm sure everybody's heard what they've seen. They see what they see. And I'm quite happy with the situation and I'm quite happy to propose the recommendation as it sits in front of us. And I'll wait with bated breath on what others might have to say and see if I can get a seconder.
Happy to second it. Happy to second it.
Councillor Desarum, would you like to speak?
I'm happy to second it. Having said this, it's a well-secluded site, and as Matthew Dalton said, there are no reasonable planning grounds to withhold permission. So, on that basis, and of course, it meets with the support of the one of the ward members. I believe we have no reason to deny what is required today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Anything to add?
Yes, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I'm one that is very much against retrospective, but okay, it's done there. if it had been actually applied for, I think we would have actually sort of asked it to be in keeping with the building that it's adjoining, because I do feel that it's a bit of a pig's ear sort of built onto there. And I think that it's a shame that it's spoiled the attraction of the existing building that is there. But no, I mean, it's there and that's it. Unfortunately, it's not really in keeping building wise, but we're happy to accept it.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Steve Gazzard next.
No, nothing new to add, Chair. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Pook, anything to add?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, it's more of a question. This is a house that's a legal dwelling, and we see these coming all the time where legal dwellings ask for an annex to be used for holiday accommodation. I just wondered what the reason for actually ruling out holiday accommodation on this was. It's a question. It's really just my understanding rather than anything else.
Mr. Rose, can you answer that one? Is it because it's an AONB?
No, it's the applicant. The applicant hasn't applied for holiday accommodation. That's why it's ruled out. The legal agreement is more about securing the swap and the use as an annex rather than it becoming a separate dwelling.
Yeah.
So not related to holiday accommodation.
Oh, I see. So it's just okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No more hands up. So over to Mrs. Shaw. Sum up, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members. You have before you the motion to approve, subject to a legal agreement and conditions as set out in the report. Please, when your name is called, would you indicate whether you're in support of the motion to recommend approval, whether you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support approval.
Councillor Key.
Support approval.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pook.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt. Councillor Pratt.
You're on mute, Jeff.
Sorry, support approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Support approval, yes.
Councillor Woodward.
Support approval.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. So that's unanimous in support. So that's recommended for approval.
Thank you. Right, agenda item 13, application 21-1560, full, it's a minor application, Atlantis, Salden End, Exmouth. I think it's Livingston actually, but pages 73 to 82. I'd like to welcome to the meeting Councillors Ingham and Councillor Young. And over to you, Mr. Rose, to present your report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this relates to Atlantis on Salden Lane. And it's an application for a rebuild of a barn that's been previously approved, which I'll talk through the history in a minute as laid out in the report. And it's before you because it's a departure. So we've got the site here in the countryside, and it relates to this a barn that was on this part of the site. So you can see the outline there near the access to the dwelling, and these are the plans that are proposed for the two-storey barn, and there are the elevations of the barn, and here are the photos. So it's partly retrospective, as I mentioned when I go through. So it's in the Green Wedge and the coastal preservation area, but previously there was a vacant agricultural building on the site, and in terms of the history, there was that barn, and then we granted prior approval under the new legislation by the governments that allowed the change of use of barns to residential, so it met those criteria. We granted that prior approval, and then following that, we had an application in 2018 to following on from the prior approval, using that as a fallback to convert the building and then to extend upwards. So that's the history of the site. And as I said, but during the conversion works, a couple of the cob walls to the buildings were found not to be fit for purpose, one of them collapsed. So therefore, the applicant has come in with this application to rebuild the building other than one of the original walls to the building. And the reason it's a departure is because the original building was taken down, other than that one wall, there is now no building there to be converted. So technically, in policy terms, it's a new build in the countryside. But you'll see from the report that given that was one wall that was retained, given that the cob structures, that I think the weather played its part when the building was being constructed, and given that the building is to be rebuilt exactly as it would have been under that 2018, the later planning permission, despite the fact that technically there was no building there to convert anymore, we feel that the application is acceptable in principle because it will look exactly like it did had the building that was there had been converted. And because it's identical to the building that would have been converted, there's no greater harm than previously proposed in terms of the green wedge or on the coastal preservation area. There's no further highway impacts and all ecological matters have been mitigated. So it's a bit of an unusual one where they can no longer rely on the fallback because the building collapsed with only one wall remaining. But the outcome is that through this application is we'll have a building on the site that looks exactly as it would have done anyway. So in light of that, and in light of no greater harm, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'd like to invite the ward members to speak now. Councillor Ingham, you have 5 minutes, and then Councillor Young, also 5 minutes.
Chair, just to let you know, Councillor Malcolm Gigg.
Oh, right, yes, that was a late one, wasn't it? Sorry, I hadn't put that in. Yep. Right, welcome to the meeting, Malcolm. Another regular. Right, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to talk before you today. Following on from Mr. Rose's comments, I'll try not to run over points that have already been raised. We have over the last 6 months worked very closely with the planning team to prepare and submit an application that would be both suitable and something that the team could support for the barn. I'd like to say that we're very pleased with the officer's report and fully support the recommendations before you today for approval of this application. As stated, the original barn is to be rebuilt while retaining the gable end and encapsulating this into the new build. It's important to identify that that many of the original bricks, as possible, have been salvaged and reused for the build, and that where possible, the original cob existed. These have been replaced with new sections of cob. This retaining the original appearance and character of the building once rebuilt. The proposal, as the report sets out, has been supported by both the district councillors for the area, as well as the parish council, and no third-party objections or comments have been received during the application. The statutory authorities, Highways, South West Water, Western Power, have all supported the scheme. Therefore, in conclusion, the scheme for the rebuild of the barn has been supported by Parish Council, both district councillors, the East Devon planning team, South West Water and Devon Highways, and no objections have been received from the general public, as I previously said. I would therefore ask the committee to support this application and to follow the officer's recommendations for approval. If I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. As it's in the green wedge, does anybody have any questions? Can you take your hands down and just put them up if you've got questions? I've got your running order. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. Well, my point, Chair, is because I did say at the beginning I hadn't got any declarations of interest, and of course now I have, because I didn't even know who the applicant was on this particular site until I've now looked at the paperwork. I didn't view that. So with Shirley, please, I would like to make a declaration of interest that I know Mr. and Mrs. Houghton have done for many years on a personal interest, but it makes no difference to my opinion. In fact, even with this, I didn't even know it's coming forward, didn't even know it's here. Not I read the report, but I didn't realise who it was.
Okay.
So I wanted to make that point. No more than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, now we go to Councillor Ingham. Is he in yet, please?
No, I have sent him an email, so
Yeah,
hopefully he'll come in shortly.
Yeah, I see that.
Excuse me, Chair. Could I
Councillor
just say something in light of what Councillor Skinner has just said? I also know Mr. House from a previous planning application in my ward, so I would like to declare an interest in this one. I didn't realise it was him. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you,
Sorry,
Councillor.
Chair.
Yeah.
Could I just ask which councillor was that was declaring an interest just then?
Councillor Lawrence.
Lovely, thank you. And that's a personal interest, but not not a biased one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Young, would you like to speak on this, please?
Good morning, committee, and thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm speaking not only as ward member, but also portfolio holder for the protection of the environment. We do have a local plan that protects the countryside under Strategy 7, and in this case, Strategy 8, the Green Wedge. Therefore, I'm very conscious that when an application is against these policies, is being proposed to be breached, it needs to be demonstrated that this is a one-off exception. Developers, being developers, will, as you know, use any breach in policy as an example of, well, you've done it here, so I can do it in this location as well. Not saying that Malcolm would ever do that. The report says that this application is against policy, and that's why it must be determined by this committee. Personally, I don't think this application does breach Strategy 7. It's an old barn which the applicant has preserved many features and rebuilt it with traditional materials, including cob, and retaining an old brick wall. So technically, it might be considered to be a new build, but this barn is a man-made feature which was contributing to the local landscape, which complies with Strategy 7, Section 2. Therefore, after visiting the site, I changed my mind and I now support the officer's recommendation. However, I would hate to see this exception to our local plan be used as an example of other developments in the open countryside to be supported in the future. I would like to see, whenever we make an exception, we make it very clear that this is a one-off because of X, Y, Z. So when developers do try to use this an example of an exception, we can simply paste the reasons why. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Ingham, is he here?
Not yet, but he sent you an email with sort of a brief sentence what he wanted to say. Do you want me to read that out?
Yes, please, Wendy, because I'm doing the meeting. I'm not on my emails.
Okay, so Councillor Ingham had said that he would like this application approved, and he has said that the council could lose at appeal. He also says we have policies the applicant has worked to, and he also says, finally says, refusal would appear to be unreasonable, and that's the end of his short email.
Okay, thank you to Councillor Ingham for that. Now I'm going to read, take the speakers in order as they were before Councillor Skinner declared and Councillor Lawrence declared their interest. So it's Councillor Skinner first, please.
Thank you very much, and given the opportunity to say my piece. It's unusual for both these ward members to support applications, actually. And I got Councillor Young, I can see you on my screen, Councillor Young, and for you to support an application must be something that's an anomaly. It's not something you normally do too often, but anyway, for right reasons or wrong, whatever that may be. When you see there's no objections and no objections from anybody, I was actually looking in. I wonder if I might ask Mr. Rose. I suppose it's here because it's a departure from policy. That's the only reason I can think that it's there, because there's actually no objections from anywhere, no objections apparently from the ward members. Is that the reason, Mr. Rose? Just the first question before I rattle on.
That's spot on, Councillor Skinner. Yeah, because there's no building to convert and it's now a new build. It's technically a departure, and therefore it's before committee.
Yeah, okay. Well, that sort of answers that then, because I was nearly thinking to myself, why has it come here at all? It could have through you, Chair, could have probably rattled along through delegated authority, but it has come for that very reason, and that quite rightly so. So on that basis, I'm not going to add any more. It's all been said. Everything's seems to be very much in order, and I very much support it, and I recommend the recommendation that's before us from the officers on our papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's up? Councillor Desarum.
I'm happy to second it because I think, as we've heard in the meeting today, the developer has retained a lot of the original brick walls and replaced the cob that was falling with a new cob. So they've tried to be as sympathetic as possible in keeping with the policy approach that is required. So I'm happy to second it for those reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Desarum. Now, I would like to say, in defence of Councillor Young, he doesn't object to every application. What he's very protective of, and is very responsible in his role as the environment member, is protecting the green wedge. So, he doesn't object to every application in the ward. That's a little bit over the top, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Woodward, you've taken your hand down.
Well, I would just support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Right, no more hands. So over to Mrs. Shaw, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, there's two elements to this recommendation, and that is firstly to adopt the appropriate assessment that is set out in the report, and to recommend approval with the conditions as listed in the report. Please, when your names are called, would you indicate whether you support the recommendation to approve, you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor Desarum.
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support approval.
Councillor Key.
Support approval.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pook.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt.
Support approval.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Councillor Woodward.
Support approval.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. That's unanimous in support, so that's recommended for approval.
Thank you. Now we go back to agenda item 8, application 212219, variation. It's a major application, Tesco Stores Limited, Seaton, and that's on pages 22 to 32. I'd like to welcome Justin Mills, the agent, to the meeting, and over to you, Mr. Rose, present your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, sir. Tesco store in Seaton, and we've got an application here for a variation of condition to the original consent. They want to alter the hours of delivery from at the moment not before 7 a.m. to not before 5 a.m. So this is an old location plan, but we're off Harbour Road in Seaton, and the Tesco store, there we go, has been built here for a number of years now. And you can see from the aerial, we've got the store, the car park, and we've got the delivery loading area. And you can see from this that to access the store, you have to come up this road, which has got new build houses on it, through the roundabout past these houses, then into the site and into the loading area. So that's up this road here. So the store's on the right, along this road, past the petrol station, round the corner here, and then into the delivery area. It's before you because it's a major application, and the town council have objected, and you'll see there's no objection from an environmental health officer, which I'll mention, but there have been 10 objections from members of the public. And So that's the access there into the loading area. So in terms of the report, it's relevant to note that in March last year, there was a statement from the Secretary of State, which made it clear that when we were exercising enforcement powers, that we shouldn't put a barrier in place to the delivery of food during the pandemic. So, members will recall in the height of the pandemic, there were issues with, well, I don't know if it's food shortages, more some panic buying maybe, and there were issues with delivery. So the government at that stage put in this statement to say that we shouldn't be, in planning, put a barrier to those deliveries and should be under enforcing, if you like, any hours restrictions to enable the stores to develop. And in light of that, Tesco understandably took advantage of that, and at the end of last year and through to some of this year, were delivering at all hours to the store to keep it stocked. The applicants advise that they want these extended hours to allow more deliveries early in the morning and for more fresh deliveries. And I think it's also pertinent to note that there's been this debate or in the news about HGV driver shortages, and the government have again given their support to allowing flexibility when it comes to delivery of goods to stores. But obviously, we need to balance that support, strong support from the government, against the amenity impact from the application. And as I said, for these lorries to get to the store, they do have to drive past the hotel and past these residential properties to get into the store. But saying that, and the residents have, the objections have stated from the residents that they put up with and haven't complained about deliveries at all hours up to now for the greater good of the public during the pandemic, but they are concerned about the moving from 7 a.m. to 5 a.m. It's pertinent to note, though, that this going into the site here is a public road, so anybody can drive up and down it. The HGVs can drive up and down it at any time of day without hindrance. So the issue the environmental health officer has raised would be noise from the storage loading area here. So the opening and closing of the doors on the vans, the lifts, the wheeling the goods trolleys in and out of the store. And so the environmental health officer has raised no objection to the application, but subject to a condition secure and a noise management plan. And that follows on from the government releasing guidance on what they call a quiet delivery scheme. So to address circumstances like this, there's a quiet delivery scheme that they've put in place where you can follow guidance on, reducing noise and sound during those unsociable hours. So the environmental health officer is recommending that we put a condition on to secure those details from the applicant, so that we can assess over the next year whether the 5 a.m. deliveries do cause a nuisance to these residents or not. So in light of that, we're recommending approval, but for a year's consent, so that we can see if there is any nuisance caused and to put that quiet delivery scheme into place. So subject to that, we are recommending approval of the application, but it also needs to be an amendment to the original Section 106 agreement, because by varying this condition, we will be issuing a new permission. So we need to make sure that original legal agreement is carried over to this application. So recommending approval, but on a year's trial basis and subject to this noise management plan to put this quiet delivery scheme in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Right, Justin Mills, welcome to the meeting. You have 3 minutes to speak. Hello?
Sorry, mute button issues.
Okay.
Apologies for that. Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Justin Mills. I'm Director of Consul Planning and Tesco's agents on this application. As your officers have highlighted, the application relates to a small increase in delivery hours at the store. It's a town centre store. The proposals seek to extend delivery hours from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and during that period, only 2 deliveries would take place. So we're prepared to restrict it to two deliveries. These deliveries are required to allow perishable goods onto the shelves, and principally that would be bread and milk. Those items have shorter shelf lives, and therefore customers expect to find fresh products on the store. And at the moment, the store is unable to take deliveries of those items before 7 a.m. So customers entering the store first thing in the morning are finding that they're either having to negotiate around pallets because items are being put on the shelves from deliveries that have just taken place, or there's older stock on the shelves. Therefore, by allowing the 2 earlier deliveries, which will generally be by smaller third-party delivery vans. So these are likely to be, as I said, the bread and the milk deliveries, rather than the larger Tesco articulated vehicles. Customers would find the goods that they need when entering. In support of the application, a noise assessment has been undertaken, which demonstrates that the proposals will result in very low noise levels and that noise impacts fall within the guidance that's acceptable, particularly in a town centre location. We do understand the objections that have been received from members of the public, but would highlight that, as your officer said, the store has been operating during that period, during the COVID pandemic, the height of the pandemic, extended hours, and there were no objections we're aware of either received by the store or we were made aware of through the council's EHO. So, this operation has been taking place and we're seeking to formalise that, but to limit it to 2 hours and for 2 deliveries during that period. The intention of the application is to secure a permanent extension of delivery hours. However, we note your officer's recommendation that it should be a 12-month temporary period to enable it to be monitored. Whilst the temporary period is acceptable in principle, we feel that a 12-month period is probably too short to be able to fully understand and for Tesco to be able to actually operate the regime. In our experience, a 2 to 3 year period is more appropriate in such locations, particularly if we're being asked to introduce the noise management regime. We're also concerned that if we accept a 12-month period now, then the delivery regime will actually go back to the original 7 a.m. start at Christmas 2022, which is the height of Tesco's trading period. And therefore, if you feel that if you feel that 2 to 3 year period is unacceptable, then we'd ask for an 18-month period just to allow us to get beyond Christmas 2022. So in summary, we support what your officers are saying. We're happy to accept a temporary permission, but would ask that it's longer than 12 months. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Over to you, Mrs. Shaw. Are we able to amend that, or does it have to be a fresh application? Can we looking for your advice here? It's a legal thing.
I'd have to liaise with Chris Rose. I'm not quite sure what the actual application was for the hours, but it is open to members to tailor conditions as per opaque glazing and things like that. So I think Chris might be able to have a clearer idea in relation to what the original application was and what his views of extending the period for the monitoring of the
Thank you. Mr. Rose, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so it is officers that are recommending a year. So if members wanted to extend that for a different period, then that's within their power to do that. I think there's 2 reasons I think that we've come to a year. One is it tallies with what we've done with Sainsbury's in Ottery. We gave them a year to do something similar. And secondly, I think a year is long enough for us to be able to monitor what the impact is. Obviously, if members feel differently, they can change that period. I suppose there's 2 things I would add. One, we don't have any members of the public here. Maybe that is because they've read the report and feel that, okay, a year is reasonable enough. And it might come as a surprise if that timescale was extended. I do take the agent's point with regard to the Christmas period next year. Although what I'd say in relation to that is, bearing in mind there's a condition there in terms of needing to get the quiet delivery scheme to us, and given that there's a legal agreement to sign, I doubt very much that actually the decision will be formally issued till after Christmas anyway. So I expect that in effect they will have from now up until sometime after Christmas to have their year. So I'm pretty sure that this will cover Christmas next year anyway. But so up to members on the timescale, but I'm a bit reluctant given what we've done at Sainsbury's in Ottery and given the report's gone out to the public stating a year.
Thank you for that. I think that's very fair. And I think, residents, as you say, will be rightly concerned, oh, it's the thin end of the wedge. So I think, thank you for that elucidation. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chair. And on the back of that, I put my hand up relatively quickly because I thought to myself this was a fairly, what I would going to deem as an open and shut case. But of course, as you listen, things change slightly. From my perspective, I'm going to move the recommendations that's on the papers, but I want to be minded for all members to understand that I'm also in a position whereby I feel that I'd be quite open to more hours or a longer period if indeed that was what was coming. I think what Mr. Rose did say, which landed with me, and I'll see what other members think, that if we didn't actually give the I forget words you used, the paperwork until after the new year, which was after the Christmas period. So it started from just after that, and then they've got their year. Well, that's almost a little extension. Might not be 18 months, but it is 13 or a bit. And on that basis, if that gives us to know where we are, there's nothing official in writing now, and it does give us parity in working in exactly the same way as our officers did with Sainsbury's. When if I was Sainsbury's looking back at this application, and they may very well be watching on YouTube or may follow it up, say, how come we did that with us and then we did that over there? And so I absolutely support where officers are coming from, but if there wants to be a little bit of leeway, I'm quite open to that, and I listen to what other members have to say. But at the moment, I'm going to go as a recommendation that's on the papers, and I'm going to propose that and see where we go with what other members feel from there on in. Thank you.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Would you like to speak on that?
Yes, I would, in actual fact, because I'd like to ask Mr. Rose a question first. How far is that unloading yard, Mr. Rose, from any of those houses, which it seems as though most of the complaints are coming from noise? Have you any idea?
I don't have it to hand, but it's in excess of 50 meters. It's quite a. I mean, you can see there the site of these are cars in the car park, so it's a considerable distance between the houses and the entrance area.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Now, I mean, the thing is, I mean, it's like was said. I mean, any vehicle can use that road any time of the day. Now, it seems as though they've got problems there with boy racers. Well, that's a problem to be taken up with the police for the residents. Now, I mean, the actual Tesco's there and the lorries going into that have been there longer, probably, yes, they have been longer than that hotel and longer than the houses have been there. So unfortunately, they have to accept some of these things are there. Now, we were given to understand by the agent, in actual fact, that it would probably be only 2 lorries, extra deliveries, which are perishables, which is milk and bread. Now, if it's just the 2 that are going to be in those extra hours, then I can't see too much of a problem. I just feel that this is a business that actually probably supplies most of those houses there, and they have to put up with a little bit of it, of a problem. Now, they have bought those houses when they knew that was the access into the Tesco's, and therefore I can't see that they can have too much of a complaint. And I mean, this extension of hours is minimal, and as I say, we're putting a 12-month time limit on it. So I fully support the application as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard, anything to add?
Nothing new to add, Chair. But
okay.
I just wanted to say, if I could, I think we have to be consistent, and as Mr. Rose has mentioned, the Sainsbury's application, I think it's only fair that we treat every big store in the same way. So I'm happy to support the application, and I think I did hear that the applicant did say that the 2 extra deliveries would be by smaller lorries rather than the bigger ones that go through at present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm taking a different position here because the Councillor Key mentioned that the residents have been putting up with it beforehand, but in fact they were putting up with it from 7 o'clock. So as I understand, this has been going on for about, I don't know, 10 years possibly before the pandemic, when the hours were 7 o'clock. So they were used to 7 o'clock. Then the pandemic came in and they quite thoughtfully didn't object because that wouldn't have been done the thing. But now Tesco's want to extend the hours from 7 till 5, which I think is a big slot of time. If you've got children and they're woken up at 5 o'clock, that makes a huge difference to your day. It may be smaller vehicles and that might be advantageous, but I still see that the impact on the amenity for the local residents is a new feature. It's only been obscured because of the pandemic, and I don't consider they should be subject to lorries of whatever size being going past their houses 2 hours earlier than they've been used to over the past 10 years. So I'm not happy at all to approve the recommendation or go with the recommendation, and I will not support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm going to echo some of the things that Councillor Woodward has said, but firstly, I think it's important to point out this isn't the same as Sainsbury's, because Sainsbury's was for a 6 a.m. Start, not 5 a.m. And I think there is quite a difference. Mr. Rose says correctly that any vehicle could use the road, but the question is, would they? There's very little reason for a heavy vehicle. I appreciate not an Arctic, but a heavy goods vehicle to go along that road if they can't get into Tesco's. There's no doubt that it is going to lead to a small increase in traffic. Now, we've been told there would only be 2 deliveries between 5 and 7, I think it is. But there's no condition for that. So I can't see anything that's going to prevent them from bringing in more deliveries. A quiet delivery scheme, yeah, all very well, but it's not going to completely eliminate noise. Bread and milk, certainly the milk comes in cages, and those things can be very noisy, very rattly when they're being pushed around. However, I'm going to support this because it's only for 1 year, and I think that will be enough for residents to assess the noise levels. And I appreciate they'll have to reapply just before Christmas next year, but so be it. But I think a year will give us time, as Mr. Rosa said, for us and for those residents to assess the noise levels. So on the basis that it's only for a year, I am reluctantly going to support it, but I do feel that this is a bit of an impingement on people, and I know what it's like, being disturbed in the early hours when you've got young children by delivery vehicles going past. I think one of the other councillors said the houses were built after Tesco, but obviously at that point the delivery hours were more limited. So I think there are a few points there that need to be slightly corrected. But given that it's only for a year, I will support it, but I think it needs to be rigorously monitored.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit torn on this one, as have been the last 2 councillors who commented on it. The noise isn't just from the traffic of the vehicles arriving with the deliveries. Obviously, staff have got to arrive, so they come in vehicles. One of the biggest noises I've noticed from deliveries in supermarkets is from those wheeled trolleys, and most of the milk and things comes in on wheeled trolleys. There's a lot of noise from that. I realise that we have to try it out, and I think the 1 year is absolutely correct. I'm sure that if we look at it rigorously in a year's time, we might well find that it's caused more of a problem than we're seeing at the moment. But I'm happy to go with it for the time being, reluctantly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Key, anything to add?
Yes, Chairman. I would like to go back on Councillor Woodward's comments, because in actual fact, those houses have not put up with the noise for 10 years because they've not been built for 10 years. They have only been built over the last probably 3 or 4, might be 5 years at the most, some of them. So they knew exactly what was going on there. And I mean, from the picture you can see on there, I mean, the distance from where the unloading bays is to the actual, to any of the houses, I mean, is some considerable distance. And I mean, you know, these people have a job to do. And I mean, if these people want fresh food and up-to-date food, not old food, then unfortunately they have to put up with some of these things that are happening. And as I say, I mean, the boy racers, they can be going up there all hours of the night. Now, unless the police do anything about it, then there's nothing they can do about it. But any vehicle can use that road because it's a public road any time of the day. And I cannot see a problem with just giving it a trial for 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Councillor Desarum.
Thank you, Chair. As someone who has worked in a supermarket, albeit for a very brief period of time, I listened very closely to what Justin Mills was saying, and I did understand the operation of the cages coming at certain times to not interfere with customer enjoyment of the supermarket experience, because I know how much the cages can be, if they're not put out on time, can get in the way of customer satisfaction and enjoyment. So I think from an operational point of view, I can understand exactly what Justin was saying. So I think that, as other members or some other members have said, I think we're going to do it for a year's trial. It is disappointing, I would say, that the town council's initial compromise couldn't be accepted. But I think, what's the phrase? We are where we are, and I think we have to just try it and see.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. I think we ought to take into account what the Seaton Town councillors are saying. They have offered a compromise to 6 a.m. as opposed to 5 a.m. And this would be, in my view, a sensible compromise. They have made that decision in view of the number of complaints from the residents. When we dealt with the Sainsbury's application at Ottery St Mary, you may recall that the area surrounding the Sainsbury's store is mostly of commercial properties and not residential properties. And in this case, as been shown by the photographs, the houses are very close to the site, and my view is, as a compromise, we should suggest 6 a.m. as opposed to 5 a.m. and then for the period of 1 year. So for the to consider the how that system works. So that's my view, and that's how I would like to vote. Thank you, Chair.
Are you proposing an amendment, Councillor Pratt?
I would be prepared to propose an amendment, yes, if that's helpful.
I would second that.
Yeah.
Chair,
yes.
Chair, could I just point out that we don't have that power at the moment in planning committee to accept those kinds of amendments unless the mover and seconder agree that as part of their motion.
Yeah. Was there a seconder for that amendment anyway? And
Tony Woodward.
Tony Woodward. And the proposer of the motion to approve, was it Councillor Skinner?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you accept that, Councillor Skinner, and your seconder?
No.
The seconder certainly wouldn't.
No. Okay.
Therefore,
So they
Chair,
wouldn't
I
accept-
believe the best way to move forward is to take the vote on the original recommendation, and if that falls, then the mover and seconder can then move a fresh
The amendment.
motion.
Yeah, okay. I know that in the past, we've dealt with amendments first, voted on it, see if it's supported, and if that falls, then we go back to the original. Would that not be appropriate?
It is for you, Chair. But to make it cleaner, I think it would be better to vote on the original motion of approval as per officer recommendation.
Okay. Well, that's new to me anyway. Councillor Woodward, your hand's up. You've got something to add?
Well, in the past, we've done an amendment first and then gone to the original to see if the amendment is accepted.
Yes, that's my understanding. But could I go to Chris Rose, please, about the 6 a.m. start?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say the applicants applied for 5 a.m. And our reasoning for allowing that is that it is only 2 vehicles. We can put this quiet delivery scheme in place. We can monitor it for a year. But I think probably more important is this background of this position from central government that have given this strong guide to us to be flexible at the moment. I mean, hopefully we're coming to the end of, or getting near to the end of the pandemic, but there is clear guidance there that we should be flexible on these matters. So I think given that strong guidance from the government, I would be very reluctant to move the hours from the 5 a.m. to 6, as some members have suggested. I think that could be difficult to defend.
Okay. Councillor Pratt, you've heard what Mr. Rose has said. If the applicant went to appeal over this, it is likely that they'd win. So would you be prepared to withdraw your amendment?
I think if I could just mention the government, when they made that decision, that was at a period of lockdown or going into lockdown, and things have changed a bit.
Well, actually, Councillor Pratt, COVID is on the increase again. So
yes, I accept that.
Yeah. So would you be prepared to withdraw your amendment?
I think that the members need to make a decision on that, and there's a recommendation or a proposal by Councillor Skinner. Let's see what happens there, shall we? And then take it from there.
Well, I think, Mrs. Shaw, the way that I've always understood is that we take amendment first, but I've got one more speaker, Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, we have just discussed this application, and it's been put forward that, for approval. Now, surely this has to be voted on, first of all, because we are dealing with the application as it stands and is put forward to us now. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to take the amendment first. No more hands up. Could we take the amendment to alter the hours? Can I go over to you, Mrs. Shaw, and you can put the word in?
Yes. Members, you've had a motion to recommend approval. However, the hours of operation have in the condition, I'm just looking quickly to see which condition That was
number
in
5.
condition 5. Yes, condition 5 be changed from a 5 a.m. start to a 6 a.m. start. If you are in support, when your name is called, if you're in support of the motion to recommend approval with that amendment, please indicate whether you're against the motion to recommend approval with that amendment or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Support the amendment.
Councillor De Sarum.
Against, leave condition 5 as is.
So you're against?
Yes, I'm against it.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Against.
Councillor Key.
Against.
Councillor Lawrence.
Against.
Councillor Pook.
Against.
Councillor Pratt.
For the motion.
Councillor Skinner.
Against.
Councillor Woodward.
For.
Councillor Ragg.
Against.
So with 7 votes against the recommendation, that recommendation has fallen.
Thank you. And we go back to the original proposed. Councillor Pratt, your hands up again.
No, it should be taken down. Sorry.
Okay. Then we go back to the original officer's recommendation. Over to you, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members. Back to the original officer's recommendation, which is to, let me just get my piece of paper back, is to approve subject to the conditions as listed. And I'd forgotten also in that amendment was that there is a need for a linking Section 106 agreement as set out in the report. If you would indicate when your name is called whether you're in support of that motion to recommend approval, whether you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support motion to approve, including the Section 106 link.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support approval.
Councillor Key.
Support approval.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pook.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt.
Abstain.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Councillor Woodward.
Against.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Okay, so that's 8 in support, 1 against, 1 abstention. So that is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Wendy. Now we move to agenda item 10. Application 202427 full to minor application, Settle Bar Line Beer, pages 43 to 52. And I'd like to welcome Martin Lee, the agent, and go to Mr. Rose for his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a construction application for construction of a dwelling off Bar Line in Beer. So we've got the existing dwelling here, its garden and plot runs down. We've got Bar Line that sort of comes to a head here, and they want to construct a dwelling in this rear garden. So you can see that the character of the area is these larger properties in large plots. And if I just move on, there we go. So we can see we're cutting into the hillside to provide this dwelling in this location here with a retaining wall and parking spaces. And pertinent to note, which you'll see in the photos, is a public footpath that runs down the side of the site and then down past here. So the site's prominent when you get to this point of the road from that footpath. So we've got the layout of the property, the ground floor. So we've got parking spaces, lower terrace, and then the floors, and then the upper floor, which extends back to a terrace. And in design terms, we get this. So we've got the main house at the front. You can see the cut down into the slope with the lower ground floor and the upper ground floor and the roof. So this is the image. So you've got the main house up there. This is the public footpath that runs down by this hedge down here and then off down to the left. And you can see we're at the end of the road with garages. This is the image of, again, looking back. So we've got the retaining wall and then we've got the main dwelling. And then you look back at the road, you can see the boundary walls and the planting and the larger plots set back. So they've got the previous scheme. So there was a previous scheme on the site that was refused on the basis of its design position being out of character with the area. And here we go. So this is it in the plot. So you can see we've got quite large plots, the dwellings set back from the street with their garden areas. It's in the built-up area boundary, so therefore the principle of development is acceptable. But we've got policy D1 of the local plan that seeks to secure high quality of design and to ensure that development is in character with the area, and that's mirrored by the neighbourhood plan policy, which seeks a high design, wants development to be sympathetic to the area and to minimise its impacts. In terms of the design, the lower wall of the building is to be bare stone, as you can see, with rendered above. Also we've got the roof here, which is of a brown colour, which matches in with the roof colours of the surrounding area, albeit that it's not a traditional pitched form. In terms of the impact on the street, we're concerned that it's forward of, in these rear gardens, it's forward of any development that you get along this part of the road, which is mainly garages and front gardens and driveways. And you've got this large retaining wall that's cut into the bank that's going to be a feature that's out of character with the area. And that retaining wall, some 3.5 or 4 meters high. And so the site will be highly visible, particularly from this public footpath that runs down the site. At the moment, you get this sort of open area here. You get the properties set back. You get some garages that are forward of the building line, but no dwellings that are in this location. And when you get to the top of the footpath, that dwelling will be very prominent. So this is the views as you come down the road. So it's this area here at the moment. You can see the footpath up. So you feel as if you come to the end of this lane and that all you've got is garages. There's a new dwelling going on the plot. So this is the plot to the right of the footpath, a new modern contemporary dwelling, which is a bit further under construction now. And this is the footpath. So the site is in here. So we're concerned that removing these trees and cutting into this bank is going to create a dwelling that's out of character, and on a smaller plot in the street scene. So we feel that the proposed design is not sympathetic and it's out of character of the area, and therefore, as were the previous application, we're recommending approval. Although I must say there's no concerns about amenity or overlooking, and there's adequate parking on the site because there's 2 parking spaces proposed. But the concerns from officers is that it's a development of this garden area cutting into the hillside that's out of character with the area. So we're recommending refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Martin Lee then. Welcome to the meeting, and you have 3 minutes.
Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application. The application is a resubmission following a previous refusal. The revised submissions address concerns over materials and demonstrates the revised palliative finishes. The officer report now confirms the changes provided palliative exterior finishes, which they consider wholly in keeping with the area. The officer report also confirms the current design is acceptable in this location. The justification for refusal, however, suggests it's simply the scale of the proposal and the degree of coverage of the overall site area to which officers wish to maintain their objection. No specific policy criteria provided to justify rejection on the basis of site coverage. This application was submitted at the beginning of November 2020 and has been with the EDCC for just over a year. We've made it clear from the outset that the applicants are happy to discuss further changes. We've made every effort to seek confirmation from officers as to what precise changes are required to address their outstanding concerns. And we've received written confirmation that neither the case officer nor his manager can identify what changes would, in their eyes, make the proposal acceptable, despite stating in the officer report that design is acceptable. The settled bar plot stretches from underleads to bar line with a significant change in level across the plot of approximately 11 metres. The lower half of the garden is disconnected from the existing dwelling as a result of this substantial change in levels. and has become redundant and unkept as it not easily accessed or maintained from the existing dwelling. As such, it represents an opportunity to visually improve the setting via new development. The proposed dwelling is for a modest family home, providing 3 bedrooms with living spaces on the first floor to maximise natural light and views. The external amenity space has been broken down into 2 levels, positioned to the side and rear of the dwelling with parking, and the main entrance positioned at the same level as bar line, providing a mobility compliant level access to the lower floor of the interior accommodation. A separate side pedestrian access provides level pedestrian access to the upper floor accommodation. The dwelling is easily comparable in scale to surrounding dwellings, been carefully designed to avoid overlooking, and has a low pitch roof to avoid affecting any existing views. It presents a contemporary yet sympathetic design, which provides a point of visual interest at the end of bar line. The majority of the building is secreted below surrounding ground levels, particularly on approach from bar line, and contrary to the officer's report, I believe the scale is appropriate to the area. In recent years, Beer has benefited from the introduction of a selection of new contemporary homes amongst 20th century development, which we believe positively contribute to the intricacies and the depth of character which this unique village possesses, as a contrast to and without detracting from the historic
30 seconds left.
Protected by the designated conservation area. Chair, the applicants are understandably frustrated that despite officers taking more than a year to come to a formal recommendation, that it is one of refusal. There has been no constructive engagement in the collaborative dialogue from officers seeking to secure a positive outcome to the application over the 12 months since submission. Accordingly, we encourage members to consider the current proposals positively
3 minutes.
and vote either to A, approve the scheme as submitted in accordance with the schedule of materials and design, already expressly supported by officers in the published report before you today, or defer the application's determination for 1 month with instruction to officers to engage and negotiate appropriate revisions to the submitted scheme so it may be represented to the next meeting for reconsideration. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to, as there's been criticism of the officers in this, I'd like to invite Mr. Rose to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Well, firstly, there's no denying that it has taken us a year to deal with this application. It's been caught up in the vast number of planning applications that we've received, and I can only apologise to the applicant for that. With regard to the design, I think with respect, the agent is confusing the design of the dwelling itself with its impact on the wider character of the area from developing this plot. We haven't engaged with the applicant because we can't think of a way that a building can be designed on this plot that will fit in character. As I mentioned, we've got large plots here characterized by buildings that aren't right at the back edge of the road. That isn't the character of this area. We've got a large 4-meter high retaining wall at the rear of the site. Those matters aren't in character of the area and led us as officers to believe that we can't think of changes to the scheme that would make the visual impact of this scheme acceptable. The design of the building in itself, in isolation, not looking at it in context, is fine, but not when we look at it in context. So that's the reason that we haven't gone back to the applicant, because we can't think of changes to the scheme that would make it acceptable. And that's therefore led to our recommendation for refusal, which follows on from the previous application. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Rose. Councillor Skinner.
Can I speak as a ward member?
Of course.
Oh, sorry.
Of course, Geoffrey, carry on.
Sorry,
No, you just ignore me all the time, don't you?
I do apologise.
I'd like to sort of just, I'm in support of this application because I feel the recommendation to refuse is very subjective on the design. And, you know, whereas some people might say it's a bad design, I quite like the design. I think it's in keeping. There are more modern buildings in Beer as well. This is not on a front street or anything. And actually, looking at the photograph you're looking at the moment, where those people are, it's not road. It's actually part of the owner's land. That just gives an access through. So that's not part of the road. The road is where the shadows end. Yeah, that's it. Not that solid line where the tree shutters end. But basically, reason I wanted to come to committee is because I felt the design was appropriate. It's new, it's modern, and looking in context of other buildings in the area, it's not out of place. Now, I did a little collage from Mr. Rose yesterday. I went up the hill and took a photograph of the house, which was approved and is now nearly complete. And you can see that, other where are we? Can you hold? Okay. So that picture is the picture from the planning application, from the planning report pack before the building, the new building was built. The red square roughly represents where the Settle Bar extension will go. And if you go down, Mr. Rose, this is what you have today. You've got a big modern building showing modern design and materials and shape, very prominent in the landscape. So my question was, I felt subjectively it was a suitable design. It was a good design. In fact, it fitted in the plot. It nestled into the plot without causing with the lowered roof. Although it was on the edge of it appeared to be on the edge of the road, as that photograph showed, it's actually on the edge of the applicant's property. But anyway, putting those aside, it was a subjective decision. My subjective opinion is that it's a good design and it will enhance the area. Officers don't agree, so I thought, well, the best thing is let committee think and see if they think it's a design that would enhance and improve the area or not. So I'll leave that to the debate of others, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pook. Councillor Skinner.
This is one of those very subjective, isn't it, applications that's come forward. And to be honest, you get twisted between sort of thinking to yourself, no, is that really what we want? And then you say to yourself, well, actually, we are in the 21st century. We can't keep on about the past and all the rest of it. So it's really, I think and it's been quite clearly set out by Mr. Rose that in principle of an application of a housing application going here is almost a done deal. So there's an acceptance of a house going here, and we're now down to whether or not we like the way it fits in. Well, in all honesty, when you look at it, and actually well done to Councillor Pook for bringing those other pictures in, because one of the questions I was going to ask Mr. Rhodes was, is there any possibility of seeing what's going on beside it? Because we just got a little corner of it. Is there any possibility of seeing that? Because actually we need to take it into the context of today. And of course, these pictures have moved on a little bit now. And it's not for any reason anybody's trying to hide anything, and nobody is. I'm not suggesting that for 1 minute. But we need to take it into context where it is. I like modern architecture, actually, and I like how in lots of occasions we need to be saying all the things we can do in the 21st century. So when we get to the 22nd century, we can look back and say the things that we did in the 21st instead of hanging on just everything else in the past. So I'm actually going to go with Councillor Pook. I'm not sure if Councillor Pook made a recommendation for approval. Did you, or did you want to hear? Well, anyway,
no, I didn't want to prejudice anything at this stage.
Okay. All right. Well, let me open up the debate so we can get it out there. We can crack on and give others opportunity as well. I'm going to go for an approval of this application on the basis that the principle of a house going there, or shall we say a dwelling going there, has been set out quite soundly, and it's really about how that fits in. I think it actually fits in quite well. And in actual fact, when you start to see the very modern one that's next door, it actually fits in even really better. So from my perspective, I'm going to go against the officer recommendation of refusal on this one. And I'm going to very much support the way forward thinking in modern housing, modern technology, and modern design as we go forward. And I'm going to get behind this and support this application. I'm getting quite excited by it now. I wish I'd gone out there to see a bit more now, but anyway, I haven't, and we are where we are in support. So I'm going to move the motion, Chair, if you don't mind, through you. I'm going to move the motion to go against the recommendation of the officers and go with a support. Whether Mr. Rose wanted to add anything to the fact that if we were to support this application, there was anything he wanted to add to that, I'm all ears to hear what that may be. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rose, would you like to respond to that?
Well, only to say that both Councillor Pook and Councillor Skinner are right. This is it's a design matter, so to some extent it's subjective. As long as members are happy that this is of a high design and it's sympathetic to the area, and they acknowledge the comments from the town council, and balancing all that together, members feel that there isn't harm to the character of the area, which officers think, then that's within your gift. That's that's the role. That's why the application is here. But you've got in the report the counter argument to that from officers. But yeah, that's for members to consider. So I don't have an issue if that's the way members want to go.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the proposal?
Happy to second, Chair. Councillor Deserham, unless
Yeah.
Councillor Pook, as the ward member, is putting it forward.
Well, he said he'd like to listen to others, but you've seconded. Would you like to speak to it?
I was going to just briefly speak to it. I think that we've got an issue, because if I heard Mr. Rose correctly, he said we cannot think of changes that would make it more acceptable. So when the applicant said they wanted to defer it to 1 month to represent, or we would like us to consider that, I don't think we can really be in that position, because it's up to us as a committee, as Mr. Rose also went on to say, do we feel the design is acceptable? And clearly what we've heard from the ward member I should say today, is it is acceptable. And I think page 49 of our pack showed two areas, the lower external walls and the roof. There's two changes that have been made, shows that the applicant has desperately tried to make it very sympathetic to the area. So for those reasons, the fact that the applicant has worked as best he can with the council to make this happen, I would certainly go along with Councillor Skinner's initial recommendation, which is of course supported by Councillor Pook as ward member. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Pook, for showing that photograph. I think that's very helpful to see. But photo, it looks as though the house is set back in its own plot. It's not directly onto that road, at the bottom of the other house's garden, which is, I think, called posts. So part of the objection from the officers is that the position of the dwelling being out of character with the area. So we may have a subjective view about how the house looks, and I quite agree it's a good design if it was somewhere else. But what I object to is the fact it's at the bottom of the garden on the road, whereas I think that the adjoining house, which looks again like a fine detached house, is set up the hill, not on the edge of the road. So I still I go along with the officer's recommendation to refuse, partly on the grounds of its position, not necessarily on its design. Thank you.
Yes, and this all comes down to whether it relates well to its context. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to back up what Councillor Woodward has said, I don't agree actually that design is completely subjective. I think that there's a broad agreement on what constitutes good design and what doesn't. Now, I would say it's an interesting design, and in another location, I would be quite happy to support that. It's not unattractive. I like the way they've used the beer stone, but it's not in keeping with the area. And as Councillor Woodward has said, and I think officers have stated, it's the position of this building. It's where it is, not what it is. And I think there's been a little bit of smokescreen going on. The principle of development is accepted because it's in the built-up area boundary, but that doesn't mean that therefore any development within the built-up area boundary is acceptable. It's clearly stated that it's in conflict with policy D1 in terms of design and distinctiveness, I think it is. And I don't think it's in keeping with the area that it's in open countryside. I think that would be a lovely building, although I better be careful about talking about building in the open countryside. But I think that in that particular position, I can't find this acceptable, much as I don't object to the design, but I think it's where it is the real problem, and the fact that we don't have other buildings along there. Most of them are garages, has been stated, and therefore I will continue to support refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Pook, you want to come back?
Oh, thank you. It's just to clarify something which Councillor Woodward I mentioned about being on the road. With that, you can see that photograph there. Where those people are actually standing is private land. It's all part of the site. The road. Oh, we've gone off it now. The road finishes there, so that land could, although the owner has, over the years has let people use it as a turning circle, but the owner could actually put gates across there. Then you wouldn't be sort of on the end of the road, sort of thing. So I think we've got to bear in mind it's not in the middle of all the other properties at the end facing onto the road. It's at the end of the road, and that's where those people were walking on that picture is within the private property.
Thank you. With regard to the road, I see that there's reference to footpath. Mr. Rose, could you give any enlightenment on that, whether that's the existence of FP8?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so purely to draw attention to members that there's this public footpath that runs down the side of the site, across the end of the road, and then down here. So purely making the point in the report, and if we go on to the image, that's these gates here. So up here, purely making the point that the site is, it might be on private land, but it is very prominent in terms of at the end of the road and adjacent to the public footpath.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Pratt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to go along with this. I quite like the design. Councillor Pook has mentioned that the land fronting the house would be within the ownership of the site. So I think I can't see any objection to it myself. It's a personal decision, and that's the way it has to be, I think. So there we are. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask Mr. Rose a question? That picture that we have there shows that the bit of land in front of the property, which is part of the owner's land, where does that other lane lead to that's directly down? It looks like some garages and things down there. Where does that lead to? And where's the access to that? Does it have to come through the front of the new property?
Yeah, so it looks like it leads to the adjacent property, and I don't know for sure, but I assume there's a right of way across that land, either formally or through time, that allows access to those properties, but not really relevant from a planning perspective.
No. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, over to Mrs. Shaw, please, to sum up.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, could I just check, just ask if Councillor Skinner as mover and Councillor Desarum as seconder, with going with approval, would agree to delegating relevant conditions to officers in consultation with the chair and ward member?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Therefore, members, you have the motion to approve, subject to the conditions to be delegated. Please, when your name is called, would you indicate whether you're in support of the motion to recommend approval, whether you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote? Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Against approval.
Councillor Desarum.
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Against approval.
Councillor Key.
Sorry, Wendy. Support. I was on mute.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pook.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt,
Support approval.
Councillor Skinner,
Support approval.
Councillor Woodward,
Against.
Councillor Ragg.
Support refusal.
Support.
Against. So,
You mean
so
against?
you're against?
Yes, I'm against. I'm supporting the refusal as in the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. So, so that is 4 against, 6 in support. So that recommendation has been approved.
Thank you, Wendy. Now we come to agenda item 12, application 21-2036, full minor application, Kitford Hold, Orliscombe, Honiton, pages 61 to 72. And I'd like to welcome Tim Burton, the agent, please. Welcome, Mr. Burton. Over to you, Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this relates to a property called Titford Hold, Orliscombe. It's application for retention and modification of an access and track that's been provided to the property, and you'll see there's comments in support from the ward member. So we've got the property here. We've got an old access here that's proposed to be blocked up, and creation of a new access, vehicular access into the site. It'll be clearer from the photo. So this is a scheme that was previously before us. So well, let me start again. So we're in the AONB. The previous owner to the occupier to the property carried out works to put in the access track, close up the existing access, and take out the Devon hedge and put in this wide access. And at the same time, applied to change the use of the land to garden area. They applied for that. That was refused on the basis of the visual impact on the AONB from the change of use, the access track going across the field, and the works to the access. Enforcement action was taken. That was appealed, and the appeal was lost, but on technical grounds in the way that the notice was worded, with the possibility of the council going back and reissuing that. Following that, there's a new owner that's purchased the property. And they've put in an application to retain some of the works, but to carry out a number of amendments to them. So this is the scheme as came in and was refused, and this is the scheme we've got before us now. So they're doing various changes to the entrance, which I'll run through, and to the access track, and no longer including the change of use in the land. And then we've got the images here of the scheme. So this is the access. So you can see that the Devon bank's been taken out, and the access created quite a wide access here with these large unsympathetic gates put in. And you can see the view the other way. And then the access track put in across the field. And that's the previous access blocked up. So as I say, the new owners put in this application, and they are proposing some positive changes to the scheme. So they want to remove those gates and put in a more traditional 5-bar gate. The access track will be removed and become like a train tracks, just 2 routes for the tyres to roll over, so sort of grass creeks so you can't see it. So that's positive. They've excluded the change of use of the field to garden from the application, so that's positive. And they've also included the closure of the existing access and the blocking that up. But the issue is, do those changes overcome the original concerns about the visual impact of this large unsympathetic access? So as I say, that there's some positive changes here, but you'll see in the report that there's some support from the AONB team, but also some concern about whether we need such a wide and large apron and access to survey property in the AONB. So they raised concerns about whether this is appropriate, and we agree with that. I think we've certainly welcomed the changes that this applicant has put into those other things, but I think somewhere along the lines of the comments from Councillor Brown, we still think that it would be improved even further if this access could be made smaller with a less wide apron. It's a bit of a grand access to get into a field and a property in the AONB with a harmful visual impact. So we're recommending refusal again, but purely this time on the basis that we feel that this access here, the apron's too wide and could be narrower and better dealt with more planting and Devon bank, etc. Just to say the reason for such a wide apron is the access that the applicant is saying that they need this for the visibility down the lane, because it is a very narrow lane, so they want to gain the visibility here to get the access, which I can understand and I appreciate, but I think I don't think there needs to be such a big access to be able to gain that benefit. So on balance, although we welcome the changes that this applicant has made, still feel it doesn't go quite far enough in terms of minimising the visual impact from this larger access way. So it's recommended for refusal due to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Right, Tim Burton, welcome to the meeting. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Tim Burton and I'm a chartered town planner, and I represent Mr. and Mrs. Healy, the new owners of Tipford Hold. The unauthorised works were carried out prior to Mr. Healy's purchase, and we agree with the council that in their current form, it has resulted in adverse impact on this protected landscape. Accepting that, Mr. Healy does have serious concerns about the safety of the access closer to the house for his own family, who would have to use this on a daily basis, as well as for the safety of other road users. This is evidenced in the submitted transport statement. To respond to the council's concerns, we have designed a revised access arrangement that seeks to retain the highway safety improvements while at the same time mitigating the adverse landscape impact that has been caused by the unauthorised works. I remind you that this is not a new access, as it has been implied in the officer's report, as an access to the field was here prior to its modification. Therefore, this proposal actually reduces the number of access points down from 2 to 1. The access close to the house is to be infilled with a hedge bank. These changes result in 6 metres more traditional hedge bank being provided than was originally the case, and more hedge bank than would be the case if planning permission is refused and enforcement action taken. Whilst visibility displays are essential for highway safety reasons, these are to be kept to a minimum, and the result is an access much more akin to that which was there prior to the unauthorised works. The access, as redesigned, is sympathetic to its rural setting with a 5-bar gate, reinforced by planting and maintaining the paddock as a wildflower meadow. As a result of these proposals, the landscape harm caused by the unauthorised works is rectified, as is demonstrated by the fact that in their response to the AONB partnership do not object. The ward council has written in support, and the parish council also supports the application. You've received no objections from members of the public. The determining issue here is the balancing of any perceived landscape harm with the undoubted highway safety benefits. Mr. Healy is committed to remedying the planning harm caused by the previous owner. This proposal results in a single safer access, and I remind you that there were 2 previous accesses prior to the unauthorised development. As a result of this proposal, you will have more traditional Devon Bank along the frontage than prior to the unauthorised works taking place, or will have should you refuse permission and take enforcement action. In addition, you are being offered a new wildflower meadow, which will improve biodiversity. No consultee, parish council or councillor has objected. As I set out, there will be little or no landscape harm when compared with the situation prior to the unauthorised works taking place, while highway safety will be improved as a result of this proposal. The landscape enhancements could only occur if you grant permission. Therefore, Speaker, I ask you to use your judgment to come to a different conclusion than that set out by your officers in their report. We ask you to support the application and to grant planning permission.
Thank you. I note that Councillor Brown, who's not able to be here today, has said that the new gateway is in a better position than the existing one, but has to be reduced in width to that of the original gateway, so not fully in support. Right, Councillor Key.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I mean, the thing is, I mean, with this, I mean, I've driven past this in particular to actually see the situation several times. Now, this is a very narrow lane here, very narrow. And in actual fact, I'm going to sort of say that this big entrance that is there, I had to use it because I had to pull in to actually let somebody else pass that was there. So it does two things. It not only just actually accesses the property, but it also is used as a passing place, because there is no other passing places along this lane at all. And it is very useful. I appreciate the fact, looking at the gates there, they are an absolute monstrosity, and the applicant is prepared to actually rectify that and put a better design of a gate there. I think probably a wooden gate. I cannot see a problem at all with the actual access there. The access is there, it's been there. It's not, it could be slightly painted differently if one wanted. It could be green, so it's in keeping. The Blackdown Hills, they're more than happy to accept what is there with all of the alterations that the owner, the present owner is like doing. So honestly, I cannot see a problem with this. And I'm sure that I've not spoken to the owner at all, but I'm sure that with the agent has said that all of the alterations will be done, because that will enhance the property, and because at the moment it looks like prison doors that are actually there, and is utterly ridiculous because the gates are higher than what the fence is either side. So people can sort of see over the wall without any problem. And in actual fact, I'm going to put forward that we actually approve this with all of the alterations that have been put forward with the applicant, which means the track is going to be taken up, and it's just going to be a tram line now, which will look a lot better because it'll probably have grass in the middle of it, and it'll look far more attractive. And therefore, I'm happy to put forward the approval of this application with all the conditions.
Right, then with that, we've now moved into the main committee. And it's been proposed then, is there a seconder?
Yep.
Is that Councillor Skinner?
Yep.
Yeah. You want to speak on it?
Yeah, thank you. I was ward member of Orliscombe for many years, and I heed on exactly what Councillor Key has said. He's been there for several years now. He knows the lane and all the rest. I know that lane very, very well. In fact, he stole my thunder a bit, Councillor Key, because actually I would know that that particular, having a driveway like that is a passing place, because when you get on that road, Councillor Key quite rightly pointed out, if you meet somebody, you've got to reverse quite a long way, either way to get past. So that doesn't change the fact of the fact that it's there, but it does actually in some way instigate because of the position we're in on the where we are basis as to where that is. So in that, yeah, I can see lots of benefits. I'm really pleased with the things that are going to change and get it back to more nature. The banks that are going to go up is going to be an improvement. So there's a plus side of it. As far as the width of the gateway is concerned, as was pointed out by yourself, Chair, that Councillor Brown perhaps didn't support fully this application on the basis of the width of the gateway. I can't actually see, perhaps Councillor Key or Mr. Rose might know better than I, but that looks to me like a reasonable, with a nice gate there, not those those doors or whatever it is you got on the picture that's in front of us. But a nice gateway there, I think would be. No, I don't think it's too wide. We've got modern machinery and farming stuff, and they've got to get to the site to do works. There's a fair bit of land there to do different things that they want to do. So I don't have a problem with that, and that's why I'm going to support this application, because actually there's lots and lots of benefits that are coming from this. And like I say, I know this area really well, and I don't see that it's particularly detrimental. It was. I agree with that. It was, but the applicants that have come forward now are trying to get it back to, and why wouldn't they get it back to a better place? And this entrance is actually better than the entrance that was before, because there was, as an existing already, there was an entrance here. So, you know, let's get some banks in, let's get some hedging in, let's get some a proper, not better gate, and let's have the passing place. And I don't have a problem with the width of the passing place, honestly. I really don't, because I know the road so well. So I think there's we can take a lot of good from this. And if I were to take from what Mr. Rose was saying, I think the officers within our policy were sort of almost a bit trapped between do we, don't we, do we, don't we. I think when you see what the our conservation people have written as well, there's a sort of a do we, don't we, that. So this is really up to us as committee members to take a very, what I call pragmatic, sensible approach to this. And I think the new owners are coming at this and making lots and lots of improvements and putting it back to how we'd like to see it come back. So I'm going to be supporting Councillor Key and the Parish Council. The Parish Council, Orliscombe Parish Council, are really, really good at planning and being very pragmatic and trying to get good things done. So the rest of my case, I'm in full support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I don't know this area very well, but I'm assuming that's a fairly quiet lane. There don't seem to be a great number of buildings along it, and I haven't seen any evidence of a traffic survey. Officers have pointed out that the existing, or they're not now existing, but the previous access was there for a considerable length of time with no record of any accidents. My problem is with this new access. You can see from the diagram, which Mr. Rose is showing at the moment, this is a considerable distance from the house, and curves right across the land. I don't know what it was used for previously, to this enormous splay. Now, I appreciate that they would like to mitigate this to some extent with some improvements to design, but I mean, they could plant a wildflower meadow anyway. So yeah, I'm not terribly swayed by that, and I just cannot see that this new access can really be justified. I haven't seen a traffic survey or anything to do with traffic speeds that really justifies putting in this new access. It just seems to be a kind of rather willful, well, that would be better, and we can have this enormous apron by our house for whatever reason, I don't know. I still don't feel that the need for this is justified. And I think I know we can't say it's a retrospective application, but I think whoever put it in has a lot to answer for. And I appreciate the new owners have taken this, but they've taken it with this history of dispute with the planning department. And I am more than happy to support the officer's recommendation to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I should say that that I am the council's representative on the East Devon AONB. I say that simply because I noted that Lisa Turner, the AONB planning officer, is supporting this application. And I carry great weight with that. And I would like to support this application and go against the recommendation of the officer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, no more hands up. So over to you, Mrs. Shaw.
Sorry, I couldn't find the button to unmute. Councillor Key and Councillor Skinner, you did approval with conditions. Are you happy for those conditions to be delegated to officers in consultation with the chair and ward member?
Absolutely.
Councillor Key?
Unmute David. David.
Sorry, both ward members.
Yes, ward members.
Yes, ward members, yes.
Yes, thank you very much. Members, you have before you a motion to approve with the conditions as just stated. Please, when your name is called, would you indicate whether you're in support of the recommendation to approve, whether you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote?
Councillor Davey.
Against approval.
Councillor Desaran.
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Against.
Councillor Key.
Support approval.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pook.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt.
Support approval.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Councillor Woodward.
Against.
Councillor Ragg.
Against approval.
Thank you. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's 6 in support, 4 against. So that recommendation for approval. That is recommended for approval. Sorry.
Thank you, Wendy. Right, now we go to agenda item 14, application 212654, full minor application, 6 Stevens Lane, Sidford, pages 83 to 86. There are no speakers for this one. Over to you, Chris, to present your report.
Thank you, Chair. So this relates to a property at 6 Stevens Lane in Sidmouth, and it's an application for a single-storey rear extension to this property. It's before you because the applicant's related to 2 members of staff, but you'll also note in the report there's a town council objection on the basis of feeling that the extension's overdevelopment of the site. So you can see it's a bungalow here and a large site at the end of this cul-de-sac. We've got an extension here. I've got property here at the moment that's got a small flat roof conservatory on the back, and they want to put a single-storey flat roof extension on the rear. So that ends up looking like this in terms of its location on the plot. And there's the aerial plan. So this is the bungalow at the moment. This is the street view, and you can see the existing flat roof conservatory, and that's where the extension is proposed, single-storey off of there. I understand the concerns of the town council, but as you can see from this, it's a very large plot. This extension won't relate to it doesn't cause overdevelopment of the plot. It's an acceptable design. There's a single-storey flat roof extension there at the moment. It's got matching materials, and from the street scene, you're only going to view it from these properties behind this wall, and just as an extension of the existing extension, the conservatory. Sorry. And in terms of amenity, it's centrally located within the plot, single story, considerable distance to the surrounding property, so no harm from the extension itself. So in light of that, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, the thing is, if this hadn't have been a relative of the council employees, I think this would probably been done under delegation. So I'm more than happy to actually put forward the recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I will. Second.
Councillor Skinner?
Yeah, nothing more to add. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Woodward, anything to add? Oh, no, nothing to add. He's gone.
Yeah,
right, over to you, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members. You have before you a motion to recommend approval with conditions as set out in the report. Please, when your name is called, would you indicate whether you support the motion to recommend approval, whether you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote?
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor Desaran.
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Support.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pook.
Support.
Councillor Pratt.
Support.
Councillor Skinner.
Support.
Councillor Woodward.
Support.
Councillor Ragg.
Board approval.
Thank you. That's unanimous, so that's recommended for approval.
Thank you. Now we come on to our last application. Agenda item 15, application 212401. It's a minor application for Ridgeway Mead, Sidmouth, pages 87 to 92, and there are no speakers.
Thank you, Chair. So this relates to 4 Ridgeway Mead in Sidmouth. Members might recommend notice the address because we had an application come forward committee recently for change of use of the area of the land at the back to garden, which was approved. And this application relates to a garage on this part of the site at the moment that they want to rebuild with a games hobby room above to make it sort of single or 2-story. So you can see here, so we've got the garage, got the room above on the boundary, and then also there's a decked area that leads out onto the raised garden area. So this is the garage at the moment. You can see it's on the boundary with the neighbouring property that's also got a garage there. So you want to raise it slightly, put a pitched roof on it. You can see it's in a very poor condition at the moment. And also then you raise it up, put the ridge on with the games room, and then put decking out to link up with this raised garden area. Again, it's here because it's a member of staff application. It's in the AONB, but there's no harm to it. It's just a small extension to the garage. There's no harmful impact on the amenity of the neighbour. The windows in the roof here are at high level, so there's no overlooking. It's set back from the road, so there's no visual impact on the street scene. So no harm, acceptable in principle, no harm to the street scene, no harm to the neighbour, recommended for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This would have been another one probably done under your powers as delegation if it hadn't have been a member of staff. So I'm more than happy to put forward the recommendation of approval.
Is there a seconder?
Yes, I'll do that. Yep.
Who was that? Councillor Skinner?
Yeah, that's good. Nothing else to add. Nothing to add.
Thank you. There are no other speakers. So over to you, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, you have before you a motion to recommend approval subject to the conditions as listed in the report. Please, when your name is called, would you indicate whether in support of the motion to recommend approval, you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Approve.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pook.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt.
Support.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Councillor Woodward.
Support approval.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. That's unanimous in support, so that's recommended for approval.
Thank you, Wendy. That brings our meeting to an end, and I'd like to thank everyone, including members of the public, for their attendance. Members, can I remind you that until the Democratic Service team confirm that the live streaming and recording has stopped, you can still be seen and heard, and any comments may be recorded. So thank you, members, and thank you, officers. We've had a few interesting ones this morning.